As you're learning your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and practicing your web coding, you may discover something new that's not widely known. It may or may not be practical, but it goes to show the wide range of possibilities with CSS. My name is Peter, owner of Tilret Web Design, and in today's video I want to share with you something I stumbled across regarding radial gradients. I'm obviously not the first one to discover this, but I thought it was a cool little trick, so I'm going to pass it along to you. So with that introduction, let's get started. So for this demonstration, I've arranged 7 equal size 200 by 200 pixel squares in which we'll show what the gradient manipulations can do. So just to save time, I've already entered the codes and commented them out so we can then discuss each manipulation in turn and show the effect. So I showed in a previous video that radial gradient backgrounds can be set up with color stops, and we can make it look like we have a single circle in the middle of the square. So to review, the radial gradient in the first square is set up with a yellow from the center out to a radius of 75 pixels, where the gradient then turns black for the rest of the area. So by default for a square, the gradient's origin is at the center. So we could also write what I've written here below, circle at center, and you get that same result. Now since these are 200 by 200 pixel squares, you could also write circle at 100 pixels, which places that in the center. But with that said, the second square here shows the effects of changing the position of the origin. So in the second square, we've used circle at 0, 0, which is the top left corner, with the result that you see only the lower right quadrant of that circle. Likewise, in the third square, we shifted down and used circle at 0, x, and 50% y, with the result that you only see the right half of the circle. Now, one cool trick I learned is that radial gradients are treated like background images, and you can thus change their position as well. Not just the origin, but the position themselves, like a translation. So for our radial gradient examples, this is done by adding x and y translations to the end of your other properties here in the parentheses. So in square 4, we'll start in the center as we did with square 1, but then we'll shift it left by negative 100 pixels. The result you might expect is for it to match what we see in box 3. But that turns out not to be the case. You actually see the circle flow around and come out the other side. And to really emphasize this effect, in square 5, we've set up the gradient in the center and then translated it 100 pixels to the right and 100 pixels down. Again, we might expect to see only the upper left quadrant visible, but in fact, we have the flow through to where the rest of the circle shows up in all the other corners. And I thought that was pretty cool. But that's not the reason I made this video. I even found something cooler than that when I took it to that next step. That is when we set up the gradient with circle at 0 and 50%, like in our third square, but then we move it over to the right 100 pixels. Now, I thought what would happen is it would expose the full circle and look like square 1, but it turns out it shifts only that visible half of the circle over. I didn't know it could do that. And just to confirm that, I set up the gradient with origin at 0, 0 as per square 2 above, and then moved it 100 pixels to the right and 100 pixels down. The result was that only the wedge moved. So again, I'm sure this has been shown before, but I've never realized this behavior. I thought it was pretty cool. So if you're out there practicing your coding and you run across things, just play around, see what you can find, and maybe you can have some use for it. Is there a practical use for this trick? I don't know, perhaps it can come in handy for logo design, or if you ever do any of those CSS battles where you have to replicate a design using only CSS. But either way, it's fun to discover these things and helps you continue to learn with your web coding. So again, I thank you for joining me today, and I will see you next time.